Good morning. Thank you all for coming, and this is a very, very big and special occasion, besides having a wonderful panel to kick it off. Welcome to Time to Decide Europe Summit 2025. My name is Judy Dempsey, and I'm your host today. The Time to Decide Europe Summit started as a joint initiative of the ERSTE Foundation and the Institute for Human Sciences in May 2022. It emerged as a response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a moment where European decision-makers were confronted with many urgent and complex questions across political, military, economic, and social spheres. Since then, the challenges have only intensified and multiplied. The Russian war against Ukraine is still ongoing, and Europe has been sidelined in the ceasefire negotiations. Great powers are once again calling the shots, making decisions over the heads of smaller countries. US foreign policy is becoming increasingly transactional and unreliable, prompting Europe to re-evaluate the transatlantic relationship. At the same time, Europe's economic model is also under increasing pressure. All these issues and questions will be discussed today. There will be three 90-minute panel discussions and a concluding panel featuring the three chairs. Unlike traditional conference formats, at the Time to Decide Europe Summit, high-level decision makers do not give speeches, but ask experts for their advice, thus reflecting the reality of decision-making processes. During the final panel, you will also have the opportunity to ask questions, and I mean that. If your question can't wait until then, speakers will be available in the breaks. I now have the great pleasure of welcoming the chairman of the ERSTE Foundation, Andreas Treichl, to the stage for his welcome remarks.
So, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here today. I'm the Hausmeister, the local Hausmeister, and I would like to tell you quickly why we do that and why it is so incredibly important for us that we get this wonderful group of people together. The reason is that we are very worried. If you look back at our history, we were founded in 1819 as an institution, actually as a non-for-profit institution, to help people in the former Austro-Hungarian monarchy to live a decent financial life. Because at that time, 200 years ago, it was not possible for a normal human being to gain interest because no bank would accept them, and it was not possible for a handicraft to get a loan because no bank would accept them. So we were founded to help normal people to gain some of financial well-being as much as possible. Wherever we operated throughout the monarchy. We founded savings banks all over the region, and then in 1997, we started to acquire all those savings banks to form ERSTE Group. And I think that we can say that we are economically a very, very successful institution. We are the largest financial institution between Russia and Germany, but we now have to admit that we failed politically, because we were not founded as an institution that is here to give people a chance to live a healthy financial life. We were founded to give everybody a chance to live a healthy financial life. We were founded in our statutes. The first sentence reads as follows: no age, no gender, no nation, and no social status shall be excluded from the services that we have to offer. If you just think about the fact that more than 200 years ago, two old men, a Catholic priest and the Jewish central banker who founded ERSTE, thought about the gender and age as a matter of discrimination. An incredibly modern thing. And it was a very, very, very democratic statement. So we were not founded to help people to live a healthy financial life. We were founded to help people to live a healthy financial life in a rule-based democracy. And as we are economically successful, we have to admit that we had been very successful also following our political wish. But that's fading away. In almost every country that we're in, we see political movements who are willing to break democracy, who are willing to break rule of law in order to pursue their political success. And we as an institution don't want that. We want the region in which we operate to be free, where everybody has a chance to be successful, and not only those people that fit to the face of the ruling party. And so please, today, address those issues that are really important for us in order to make this region and all of Europe what we once were. We were the most successful continent on this planet. We should never forget that Europe was a huge and dramatic success story from 1945 on. For 60 years, Europe was, that's the thing to do. We lost that touch, and we have to really think about why we lost that touch in the past 2 decades, and how can we get back to it. There's not much time left to talk. There's a lot of time left and a lot of urgency left to do things. We've got lots of politicians in here who would love to follow the way that our institutions were built. We have lots of politicians out there who are not here, who would love to do it, and somehow we don't manage to cooperate between the nation states and the EU such that the success of Europe can continue in the future. So I hope today we find solutions. We need them badly, and I wish all of you an incredibly interesting day, and hopefully with incredibly interesting results. And now it's my turn to introduce our Minister for European and International Affairs, Beate Meinl-Reisinger, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. It's an honor to be here. Excellencies, former ministers, distinguished guests, it's really great to be here, and I think it's quite timely to discuss all the things that you, Andreas, also put here on the stage. Welcome to Vienna. I think it's a moment of profound historical change that we are living in. A moment when the ground under the international order is shifting, and it's shifting not quietly. In fact, it's even not shifting slowly, but with the force of a landslide. Even in the last days, we saw it quite clearly. Across the world, we see the return of hard power, the return of a worldview that seeks to benefit the strong and punish the weak. The return of illiberal and authoritarian movements. For the first time since the Second World War, we're living in a world where we have more authoritarian countries, autocracies than democracies. They outnumber democracies. In some sense, we are moving backward, not forward. For decades, and this was also my youth, I grew up believing that the whole world should simply follow Europe's model. Openness, freedom, cooperation, rule of law. Instead, Europe is now waking up in a world where these principles are clearly challenged. Even worse, we are slowly and very painfully recognizing that some of our most valid ideas were illusions. It was an illusion that peace in Europe was permanent. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it broke not only international law, but our entire worldview. Peace is not the default setting of our continent. It exists only when we create the conditions that make aggression too costly to attempt. It was an illusion to assume that relying on Russian gas, and Austria did this, and Chinese demand came without a price. It felt like stability, but in fact it was a cruel dependency. When those partners weaponized energy and weaponized trade, Europe saw that its economic foundations were far more fragile than we wanted to admit. Finally, it was an illusion to believe that Europe can forever depend on the United States for its defense. Donald Trump said it on the first day of his office. From this moment on, it will be America first. And he meant it. And his actions prove it. Just look at Ukraine. The reality is simple. Either Europe builds its strength to defend itself, or Europe will soon find itself undefended. As we are witnessing the painful end of these illusions, the title of this summit captures the moment that we are living in perfectly. Europe must indeed decide, and I think it's really now that Europe has to decide. The question is, would we like to be a museum where everybody wants to come and visit our beautiful cities and walk around in a world of rapid change, a museum? A helpless victim that is, in a way, looked at to be kicked around in a new age of geopolitical confrontation, or a strong, confident, sovereign Europe, able to protect our citizens, our interests, and our values. This is the simple choice ahead of us, but making the choice requires more than statements. It requires vision, it requires courage, and it requires leaders willing to make decisions even when they are difficult. Maybe because they are difficult. Even when they are unpopular. Maybe even because they are unpopular. It takes leaders to take these decisions. Even when doing nothing seems much easier. Dear guests, dear participants, today we will discuss some of the most profound challenges Europe faces. How to regain economic competitiveness, how rising nationalist movement will reshape Europe's resilience politics, and how small states can survive in a world where the law of the strongest once again challenges the strength of the law. And these are not isolated debates. They all point to one key question. Can Europe survive in this new era? Or maybe it's even more than surviving, because then it's a little bit too negative. You know, there's this idea of anti-fragility that says that you not only survive things, that you're resilient, but eventually you can use all this negative power around you, make decisions, and go out and be stronger again. If we want the answer to be yes, then Europe must fundamentally reform itself and relearn a few things it has forgotten. Let me illustrate three important things that I think that we have to discover quite fast. First, Europe must rediscover the power of speed. From artificial intelligence to clean tech to defense production, Europe is consistently too late, not because we lack talent, but because regulations slow us down. It is quite simple. Creativity needs freedom, not paperwork. That is why we must push forward with deregulation, both in Brussels and here in Vienna as well, in our member states. When it takes 25 days to start a business in Austria and 5 days in the United States, you cannot be surprised that Europe keeps losing the global tech race. Second, Europe must rediscover the power of unity. We cannot survive in these dangerous times with the decision-making system designed for the world of yesterday. Also for a world where we had time to decide. As long as a single government can veto any EU foreign policy decision, we will remain a spectator in moments when we should be leading. Our rivals exploit these divisions every single day. If Europe wants to speak the language of power, and I think it's about time to do so, it must first learn to speak with one voice. And that means, of course, moving beyond unanimity in foreign and security policy and embracing all the possibilities of a qualified majority voting. Not to weaken small states, but to protect them. In a world of great power competition, unity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Sorry. And third, Europe must rediscover the power of strength. We are a continent of 450 million people, with the world's second largest economy. Yet our security depends on a few, let's face it, swing voters in a handful of US states. And this is absurd. Absolutely absurd, actually. Europe needs to establish a defense union worthy of the name, shared capabilities, joint procurement, and a defense industry that can produce at scale and at speed. It's not about, because I just had a conversation about it, it's not about a new arms or weapons race. It's about the necessity to now to face the challenges ahead of us and get ready for these challenges. Ah yeah, we talk to each other. See, I listen. I'm a politician that even listens. Security begins with readiness, and Europe can no longer afford to be unprepared. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be absolutely clear. The world will not wait for Europe. That's just a fact. History will not pause until we feel ready. Our rivals will not stand still. The longer we delay reforms, the weaker we become. We must take action now. If Europe wants to remain a global actor, not a museum, we need unity, speed and strength, also economic strength. Above all, we need confidence that freedom is worth defending. Yes, we must decide, and the time to decide is now. Thank you, and I wish you a very productive summit. Thank you very much.
Oh, she's gone. I wanted to thank her. Well, thank you. Well, the Minister certainly set a very high bar. I hope she's heard this. Well, you heard unity, speed, deregulation. Now, this is the panel called From Ambition to Action, How to Make Europe Competitive Again. We all know the problems, slowing growth and productivity, high energy costs, demographic challenges, which we discussed yesterday, fragmented financial markets, increasing global competition, protectionism, threatening Europe's long-term economic prosperity. And at the same time, Europe needs to mobilise huge sums of money to drive forward the green and digital transitions, as well as its military build-up. How can Europe address its structural weaknesses and mobilise the necessary investments to strengthen its competitiveness and defence capabilities and become a leader in the technologies of the future? I don't have to answer these questions. The chair of our first session is Martina Dalić, and she's certainly going to ask herself these and other questions frequently, as she does so. She's the president of the management board of the Croatian food company Podravka, and a former Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy, and Minister of Finance of Croatia. Ms. Dalić, please join me on the stage. Good morning. Dobar dan. Good morning. You're not alone, don't worry. Now, 8. So you have a big task. You've got 8 people to look after, like a school classroom. And so 8 distinguished experts will help her, Madam Dalić, to make sense of Europe's economic challenges. Please join me in welcoming from left to right, you all have to come up now, Ebtesam Al-Ketbi, President and founder of the Emirates Policy Centre. Welcome. James O'Brien, he's over here. James O'Brien, former US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs and Europe's Future Fellow. We have Rosa, Balfour, Director of Carnegie Europe and Europe's Futures Fellows. We have Karel, Lannoo, CEO of the Centre for European Policy Studies. That's CEPS. Where is he? Ah, there you are. We have Andreas Treichl, Chairman of the Supervisory Board of ERSTE Foundation. I'm not finished. We have Atanas Pekanov, economist at the Austrian Institute of Economic Research and former Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria. And we have Marie-Helene, Ametsreiter, General Partner at Speed Invest. And I think he's maybe at the airport, or he's on his way. Tomáš Sedláček, Director of the Václav Havel Library and Europe's Future Fellow. Ah, he's here. Excellent. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I have a rather complex managerial task here, so allow me 2 sentences to agree on how we are going to work. It is my ambition to actually create opportunity for each speaker to have approximately the same time slot. I will ask some individual questions. I will ask some questions for all of you. And I would kindly ask you if you want to join the discussion or comment on the previous speaker, please somehow give me a sign. We have an hour and a half, 10 minutes is already used. So I would like to ask you to somehow keep your interventions between 4 and 5 minutes to have the dynamic of the discussion. So my first question is for Mr. Lannoo. A year ago, or more than a year ago, Mario's Draghi report was issued, and it laid down the vision for European competitiveness. So I would like to ask you, is competitiveness really a top priority in the discussions among institutions, among European policymakers? Do you see the rush and excitement about competitiveness in the processes taking place in Brussels?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Also, thank you for these visionary introductions by Andreas to remind us about the European model. And I think this is something we should be reminded of, let's say, how specific our model was, and we often forget that, but also by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that we live in. I just wrote the introduction for our newsletter, end-of-year newsletter, under the title Scary Times. I think I've never done this. We live in very scary times, and we need to be aware of this. But let me first say, a few thoughts on competitiveness. First of all, I think we overdo a bit the feeling of economic, difficult times it's like we are in an economic crisis. Don't forget, of course, we are a block of countries with very different economies and which are working at different feeds, and sometimes, the one counterbalances the other. But we still have an economic growth of 1.3, 1.4%. It was revised upwards recently by the ECB. We are more underdoing ourselves than kind of being confident in ourselves. That's the first thing. The Americans are just the opposite. They are far too confident in themselves, and they sometimes don't realize, like you hear the whole thing about the AI bubble, let's say, which may be totally overdone at the moment. So we should be more confident in the European economy and how we are performing. And that's, I think, the first thing, because the Draghi report, which you mentioned, I remember, I didn't find any positive message in there, which I found wrong. We are doing many things very well, but the minister also said that, let's say, the key thing which we need to do in Europe, also economically, is cooperate more. Let's say we are far too much still biased, focusing on our small little countries where we feel very much at ease, very cozy. We need to think European, and this is so important. Of course, we're trying to do this now since 67 years or so within the Treaty of Rome, but there's still so much to be done. And Are we moving forwards? Yes, I think sometimes we are, but I'm not entirely sure all the time. But the big thing is, first of all, so we should be confident in what we do. Secondly, with competitiveness. Madam Chair, the word competitiveness, I couldn't find a definition, for example, in the letter report. What is competitiveness? And this has, of course, been even the subject of a lot of debates in academic literature. You may remember the famous article from, which everybody quotes, from Krugman from 1994 already, which is more than 30 years old, where he says it's a dangerous obsession or it's a dangerous illusion. And it's probably somewhat true, because competitiveness for a company is easy. It's the bottom line. It's your market share. It's how successful you grow. For a country, it's totally different. Because the country which is now imposing itself its competitiveness model, according to a certain definition, because it has a huge trade deficit, that's the obsession of Trump, is for us portrayed as being the competitive model. Whereas Europe, which has a trade surplus, is seen to be in trouble. So, I mean, that's what Krugman said in his article very clearly. I mean, there is no single measure to say about a country, whether a country is competitive. I mean, a country can be an autarky, take Northern Korea, and be still performing very well. So there are so many different ways in which you can look at an economy. That's why, I mean, competitiveness should be basically defined. And my proposal in a European context is just to make it, keep it simple. Don't speak about competitiveness, but speak about competition. What we need in Europe is simply, one important thing of the, for example, of the letter report is price competition, or of the initial reports, the Caccini reports of the end of the 1980s, price competition. And that's something which we don't have sufficiently. I know the financial sector best. Of course, we are here in a bank. Price competition in the financial sector remains an extremely important issue, let's say an extremely important target, because we have national markets like, countries the size of Austria, like also Belgium, where I come from. There are many, but there is insufficient cross-border competition. And that's what we try to achieve since almost 40 years. So what we need to do is simply more competition, and just expect, let's say, that the borders which we have between European countries are no longer borders, but that we have a single market. That's also why this whole debate which we have in Brussels at the moment about simplification, simplification has been there also for 40 years. When Delors thought about a single market, he spoke about a single license, minimal harmonization, and mutual recognition. And these principles, for me, are still extremely important today. How many banks really work with a single license, meaning that they have one head office, one place of capital, and that they do business all over the EU? I should ask Andreas, if I still see him, let's say that. Is this really? Yeah, Andreas sitting there, sorry. Is this really so? I know many banks where it's not the case. But if you speak, for example, about capital markets, we have the two biggest stock markets in Europe work with 7 or 8 different licenses, not with a single license. So this is not only a matter of, let's say, the authorities to say we need to enforce what we have. It's also in the markets. We need to say we want to work with what EU gave us, but they don't apply it. They prefer to have many different licenses just to exploit lack of transparency, lack of price competition, and to take the benefit for themselves. And of course, the authorities should enforce this, but also the public at large. You should enforce free competition, and that, I think, is a very important thing.
I do not have the bell, but a small bell.
But let me say one final thing. If I say, is competitiveness really important? One thing which struck me a lot is this EU-US agreement which Trump and von der Leyen concluded in July. I think this was just the wrong thing to say. Is this competitiveness if you accept that your most competitive economy of the world, yet you accept for exports a 15% tariff, and that you accept 0% tariffs for exports from the US to the EU? I think that is entirely wrong. If you then say, as a European Commission, we stand for competitiveness, we stand to defend the interests of our corporations, and then we accept a deal like what's accepted in this EU-US joint statement of trade for a more balanced trade agreement, where today we have a fairly balanced trade between the EU and the United States, and then you accept a very asymmetric trade deal with the United States, I don't understand this. Let's say we should have stood much more on what Europe stands for and much more insisted, look, we want an equal trade deal with the United States, not something which is there, because what we will have now with this trade deal, something which will harm us, but something which will harm probably the United States even more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this really inspiring opening statement. But now I have a question for all participants, and I would like those who are ready to answer to give a brief and short intervention. As Mr. Lannoo mentioned, what is competitiveness? Competitiveness is somehow linked with different costs businesses are faced with. Taxation, cost of a regulatory environment, EU, national, local. A reduction of these costs could be maybe the fastest route to the competitiveness of our economies and then EU as a whole. But these costs are controlled by member states. So where is the balance? And do you see that member states within their financial constraints are ready for a visible and significant reduction in these costs, which can boost the competitiveness of our businesses? Is there anybody who would like to comment? Mr. Treichl?
Immediately, if you like to, because I think I like what Karel said, but I think we're missing the point here. Why do we not have all those things? And it's the very simple point that Europe doesn't finish things it starts. We do not have an economic union, we don't have a financial union, we don't have a transportation union, we don't have a communication union. And just imagine, and that is the basis of competitiveness, is to be really good. If you're really good as a nation state or as a union, then you're competitive, and we just have to realize that we were good, because in the old industries, we were totally okay. In the new industries, we're not okay. And why are we not okay? Because we haven't finalized the European Union. Just imagine, in this trade war that we had now, if Europe had had, at the start of Trump's terms, a fully fledged financial and capital market union, so that we would finally get around to have European debt issued, and Trump would have said, I'm going to start a trade war. All the global South countries would have moved probably 30, 40, 50% of their reserves into the euro. If they had done that, Trump could have gone to hell with his trade deal because nobody would have followed. If Europe had been really powerful this year, if we had a completed financial and capital market union, Trump would have no chance of doing what he did, because Europe would be an escape route out of the dollar. But in order to be an escape route out of the dollar, you need a European market, and we don't have it. And we've started it in 1989. Many people of you who probably don't like Helmut Kohl very much, and I was not a great fan of him, but what did he do? He gave up the strongest currency in the world to allow for the euro. And that was in 1989 when he said that. He gave up the Deutschmark in order to allow for the euro. That's the first and the last time that a large country in Europe really gave up autonomy in order to build something in Europe. And still, we do not have all countries in the Eurozone. Still, we have local central banks, and we have not finished it. It's only our fault because we work as nation states, and if we want to achieve something in Europe, if we want Europe to be competitive, every state, including Austria, including Beate Meinl-Reisinger, would have to spend at least 40% of her time only and she's the only member of the Austrian government who does that. Nobody else spends 5 minutes on Europe. They spend everything on Austria, and all European politicians and nation states would need to spend at least 40% of their time only on Europe, and I stop. Thank you.
Emulate the bell. Mr. Pekanov, you would like to add something? So more Europe. So we need more Europe. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I want to start with something I thought about this summer. Well, I came to this country 15 years ago. Beautiful, amazing country. I studied here, I worked here, which gave me the opportunity then to go back to Bulgaria, to be part of the government, to bring back some of the things that I learned here. And my path of my generation is about Europe. If Bulgaria didn't enter Europe in 2007, we wouldn't have all of these opportunities, which then gives us the opportunity to bring back something home. But this summer, I was really thinking, when I was looking at the trade deal, well, Europe is not doing well. And here I have to disagree with Mr. Lannoo. We work very well with the colleagues at SEPS, really brilliant colleagues, but I have to disagree. No, there is a famous, beautiful song by Hans Zimmer, which is called "There is no time for caution." This is where we are. There is no time for caution. We have to move forward because others are moving forward. And how do they move? I don't know. I don't know what is competitiveness, but I heard President Trump already many years saying the following, and I think this is true: we have to win more. He is right. If you are caring about the interests of your citizens, you have to win more. So how can Europe win more? And here I have to agree fully with the fact that, well, we have a currency that we are not using to the fullest. I myself am very much, and I was working on Bulgaria joining the euro, and this will happen now at the beginning of next year, which is great. The euro, however, as a whole, doesn't have all the tools yet, because it's not completely complete, to be there where it could be. If we were there, if we had common debt, if we were stronger, then it's true, maybe the US administration would have less leverage to push us, because I have to be honest, the trade deal was embarrassing for Europe. We agreed that we destroyed the rules that we have agreed upon for the last decades for some, let's say, short-term stability and calmness, okay. But we gave up something that for many years we were saying, well, level playing field between big economies. So to have the leverage to be stronger next time around, we need to use the euro. The US is willing to lose its exorbitant privilege. This is what I'm telling my students. There could be good reasons that the US thinks, well, it's a duty to have the US dollar at the center of the global financial system. I believe it's a privilege. They win much more out of this, but if they decided, if Mr. Steven Miron and others find good arguments that say, well, we don't want to be in the center, well, the euro could be at the center. But
Atanas,
we need to make more steps for this. Thanks.
Thank you. On this side.
I can say something.
Please, Rosa.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is just take a step back. There's been a lot of talk about we're moving into a post-neoliberal world, and I think it would be interesting to discuss some of the ideas that are shaping up what might become the post-neoliberal world. And one is the fact that economics and security are interconnected, right? So it's no longer the sort of, unfettered, invisible hand of the markets, and security, being two separate worlds governed by different logics. Now, with the weaponization of everything, we're in a situation in which economics and security are deeply interpenetrated. And the second idea that is gaining ground is the return of the big state. Now, we saw that a couple of years ago. Jake Sullivan, former national security advisor, wrote an article in Foreign Affairs who was precisely looking at the connections between economics and security, what the state should do in order to promote a new social and political contract. So my question is, what is Europe doing on this front? So in terms of economics and security, the EU has been telling us that it's an economic powerhouse. It has tools to confront the weaponization of the economy. It decided not to use them in the trade deal with the United States, justified by our security dependencies on the US. So we're still in a place where economics and security are definitely not interconnected, or not sufficiently interconnected in the European Union, where many have argued that the EU capitulated in front of the US because of the security dependencies. The second question is the return of the big state. So in the US, during the Biden administration, we saw a massive injection into industrial policy, into green technologies. No longer the case, obviously. We've seen, a bonfire of federal institutions, but we're also seeing that Donald Trump has changed the Department of Defense into the Department of War. We're seeing that Russia has transformed its economy into a war economy, and of course China is the model for state capitalism and has been investing massively in defense. So what are Europeans doing? They are committing to spend more in defense, but they're not saying enough about what does that mean? Does that mean buying more American, i.e. increasing security dependencies with the United States, or does that mean cooperating more among European countries to make sure that Europe is prepared for the wars of tomorrow and obviously not the wars of yesterday? And I think we need to place the debate about competitiveness, about the bonfire of regulations, with these ideas in mind. The way in which the world is moving towards this sort of post-neoliberal order do not reflect anything that was part of the European Union and the European integration project of the past. So we need to think hard about what needs to be recovered from that and what needs to be pushed forward. But also we need to think hard about the bargain between member states and the European Union. Because at the moment, the Commission is not really fulfilling its technocratic role of being the guardian of the treaties and has insufficient legitimacy in order to push forward, even if we were to accept the proposals of the Draghi report, which, by the way, there hasn't been much of a political debate around them, even if we were to accept them, who has the authority to pursue that? And at this moment in time, the Commission doesn't seem to have it, and I would argue that the member states are retrenching and trying to keep power. So if we have the return of the big state, it's really member states trying to cling on to whatever powers they have left and not delegate authority to the Commission in a democratically accountable process. So those were my points.
Thank you. So let's go a bit deeper and maybe make a step forward. Mr. Sedláček, the ECB estimates that the investment requirement for the next 6 years, which somehow stem out from the Draghi's report, around 1,200 billions. So where should the money come from in the time of budgetary constraints and, of course, in the time when obviously Europe has new priorities in increasing its security shield and security and defense capabilities?
See, I don't think that's an important question.
Okay.
I think the important question is to finish what we've started. We are sitting on the best market for Europeans, not using 80% of it. And I don't think it's even good business to come to something and start decreasing costs. I mean, just imagine how far you would get if you'd start a business with that. Our business is the business of ideas. I think we are here to come up with meaning and to be able to inspire the world into something that we've turned into. We've turned into a leaderless empire. This is something that never happened in the history. Imagine your bank or your school for 2 years without a Caesar. We've fared for 75 years without a phone number to call. This is our strongest advantage. Why? Because this could be the footprint for a global order. We are the only entity on this planet that can boast of that. I mean, Chinese model isn't really impressive for the world, nor is the American, nor is the, let's say, I don't know, Islamic or African. What we have here could truly be an institutional salvator mundi, of course, after reforms, but all other horizons of other entities end with themselves. the Russian world, or let's make America great again is appealing only for Americans. Whereas we have something that, trespasses all this. Let me ask you a question. Which country invented electricity? Which country invented the internet? Are we all using it? Do we see dramatic differences between the country that invented the electricity or invented the internet? It's even hard to say who did it. And I don't think we have to, also decreasing costs, that's not the way forward. I mean, the richest countries in the world had the highest labor costs imaginable, Denmark, Netherlands. Decreasing costs isn't the way forward. We should be increasing education. We should be increasing, let me put it bluntly, we should be working on the meaning. This is what the world is hungry for. And this is why such such short-sighted stories as meaning of let's make America great again, which is something that I don't suppose appeals to many of you, but it's a story of some sort, and we don't have that. We've really this is why we got to where we were, to this unbaked cake. Our cake is not yet baked. It's actually quite a miracle that it works. I mean, look at education. I remember 30 years ago, I got my diploma in Denmark, and I had to do all these, paperwork, and it's the same today. We don't have, these are the things that we should be leading in. And then efficiency follows or not. I mean, this pen is not very efficient in frying eggs, but it's pretty obvious because everybody knows that the meaning of this pen, the purpose of this pen is not to fry eggs, but to write. And I can have a little bit like this towards the economy. The meaning of the economy is not to give us purpose and meaning and balance of life. We have to, what I mean is that economics comes secondary. Let me just conclude with science eats innovation for breakfast. I mean, it's really nice to have 3 applications that remind you that you didn't have coffee today. But in terms of science, we have the most advanced and most expensive scientific endeavor happening right not so far from here at CERN. And these are the things that we should be focusing on. And the last final sentence is that I think the real wealth of nations is not really the economy. Look at what happened in Poland. They were growing like crazy. If there wasn't a European economic tiger, it would be Poland. And yet they changed the spirit to doubting the European vision. Look at education. I mean, we've had very highly educated countries that kind of dumped all their economic progress. And it also isn't art. And I think the only thing that can lead us forward is a story, is meaning, is something that we believe in. And then the economy follows.
Thank you. Madam Ametsreiter, Mr. Sedláček mentioned innovation and electricity. So having in mind that electricity was invented, or at least huge contribution was given by a person born in today's Croatia or then Austro-Hungarian Empire. So we Europeans have something to lean on in terms of innovation and be proud of. But what are our perspectives, and where do you see our innovative potential during the years ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much. I fully agree that we are excellent in science, and that's the good news. We are not lacking talent. We are having 27,000 founders just this year, 2025, which is at equal level like in the US, that are starting companies and innovate. The problem is, what we are really lacking is a system to grow and to scale those companies. And some of you might know this, and I'm not sure, but hopefully we can see this. Here you can see companies that have been built from the scratch within the European Union within the last 50 years that today have a market cap of 10 billion or more. The issue is that in the same time frame, what we can see in the United States has happened is this. And this is the reasoning why the gap in the GDP growth is widening. This is the reason that they have a system that is fostering innovation. And, you know, the ones who invested in those companies, they got a lot of return, and this return is again invested in new innovation, in new companies. And plenty of the founders that you have seen of these companies are Europeans. Europeans that we founded with grants, with scientific institution here in Europe, but they have to leave and they have to grow their companies in other continents. So what do we need to do? And I think it's very obvious, we need to unlock capital, and we need to do it now, because as Andreas said, we are talking about the capital union for many, many decades. There is perfect models on the table, but we are not doing it. We are not executing. And to start with how to pull more money into the ecosystem of venture capital is to start with the pension funds, and I think you have heard it before, and again, we're repeating over and over. We don't need iterative steps. We need bold steps to unlock really huge amounts of capital to make this machine, this innovation machine, work. And we have 0.02% of all the assets of European pension funds, and that's 20 trillion, that is going into venture capital. This is 3, 4, 5 times the case in the US. And I honestly don't know why we still, it's again on the agenda for Q1 now, to reform Solvency II, because this was invented after the banking scandals to have very high risk reserves. And this is hindering today the insurances and pension funds to invest. So that's something we really, really need to change urgently. And the second is, it's good to invest then into these startups and to grow them, once we have this venture capital from the pension funds. But we need to also enable is to create liquidity. Meaning that once they IPO, once they go to the stock market, that they do this in Europe, so that these funds are returning into the system, that the founders that have exited start again to found their next company in Europe. And this is not happening at the moment, because there is 27 different listing regimes. There is 27 different insolvencies regimes. And I understand, and personally I don't believe we're gonna make or we're gonna achieve to have one EU stock exchange. I think it's very unrealistic. What we at least need to do is to have an EU Nasdaq, electronic exchange, a system that enables that you can invest into all European titles under the same framework, under similar conditions. We need to enable that money is not, financed and spent to other markets, but within Europe. The pension funds today, the European ones, 40%, they invest of their assets in US titles. In S&P 500, we are financing with our earned money US tech. I mean, that's absurd. So, I mean, if we have one really fundamental thing that we should change and that we need to make work, then it's the Capital Market Union, or at least the EU Nasdaq. Because then also we can unlock financing into defense, into energy infrastructure, all that. I think it's really the fundamental basis to make that happen.
Please, Mr. Sedláček.
I agree, but all this futile if we won't have services, liberated services. We can't scale these companies when there's 28 different markets. I mean, even if we have the best capital market in the world, it will just, outflow the money. We can use other capital markets. I think really the crucial thing is here is that we liberate ourselves. The demons always cry, liberate me, let's liberate ourselves from the chains that we've gathered from the past. And then it will be easy to scale. I mean, telecommunication, even AI, we can't work on AI if there's 28 different, if we can't have the liberation of services. Not just goods, but services.
Mr. Treichl, would you like
I love what Marie-Helene said, which I'm saying all the time. So I can't hear myself anymore talking about capital market. It goes so on my nerves. I mean, the first time I talked about it was in 2010. Nobody listened. Now everybody says we need it, and still nothing happens. This is so incredibly frustrating that you have Madame Lagarde saying we need a capital market, Ursula von der Leyen says we need a capital. Everybody says we need a capital market, but nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? I don't understand it. Yes, I do understand it. It's because Mrs. Lagarde cannot introduce a capital market. Mrs. von der Leyen cannot introduce a capital market. It's the ministers of finance, the ministers of justice in Austria, in Germany, in Belgium, in Bulgaria, in Portugal, who have to spend 20 or 30% of their time and their employees to get it done. All what they have to do. So all we need is to get those politicians together and say, let's do it. Let's give up the stupid things we do at home, which nobody needs anyway, and let's do something really, really useful. And if we do that, the rest will follow, believe me. Believe me, if we do that, if something happens in Europe, suddenly people will realize, hey, we can do it. And something is going on, and we managed to complete something. So please, all of you, study it, and all of you talk about it. I can't talk about it anymore. You have to do it.
Thank you. We need to give a chance to the right-hand side of the table. Mr. Lannoo.
Just to go back on what Andreas said, I think one of the illusions which we have as Europeans is we think we are a political union, but we are not. We try to be an economic union, but we give the impression to the Europeans that we are becoming a political union, but it's not. And we have a huge administration at the center which is not accountable. If it were to be accountable and directly elected, it would function much better, because then there would be the pressure of the European citizens to say, look, you're not doing your work well. And that is not functioning. So you now have an administration, imagine, about 87,000 people which work for EU institutions, in the broad sense of the word, 87,000, which is enormous. What is the accountability and how do you enforce it? If I see the Parliament in Brussels, which is only one element of this, the European Parliament is lobbied like hell by interest groups. But European citizens, they just don't know what is going on. Even in my own country, in Belgium, the Belgians don't know what is going on in the European Parliament, which is based almost in Belgium. And that is so cynical. We need to ask for a form of direct election of our top commanders of the EU. And that's why, for example, Trump has so much power, because he said, I'm sovereignly elected. I can decide what I want. I mean, Madame von der Leyen cannot do this. Costa cannot do this, just because they're not directly elected. And the way the Americans regard us as Europeans, they say, this is a big theocracy. They have no sovereign power to decide what they want to decide. The sovereign power is at the national level, not at European level. And probably the member states also don't want it, because they would have a European institution which would dictate them to say what they need to do. And that, of course, is difficult. But at some stage, Europeans need to decide.
Thank you. Let's make another step forward. Madam Al-Ketbi. There has been mentioned on several occasions by several speakers the trade war. Is there a time for new alliances, new trade partnerships? How do you see this opportunity from your angle, from the angle of, for example, Gulf states, which are obviously trying to establish their position among the developed countries?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for Krista for this chance, and thanks for ChatGPT nominating my name as a participant or speaker in this. I hope I will not fail all of you. But coming, of course, somebody is asking between you, what does this lady coming from the Gulf, putting a scarf, doing here, and talking about Europe? Europe is one of the main area Gulf trade with and deal with, even before United States. But I'm bringing the Gulf perspective. How do we look to Europe, and how do we want Europe to be? And when I'm giving that title, From Ambition to Action, how to make Europe competitive again, I think Europe doesn't lack ambition. It has a vision for green leadership, digital sovereignty, and strategic economy. What it lacks is execution at scale. To move from ambition to action, Europe must make 3 decisive shifts. I mean, to be an ally to somebody. I'm coming from a country, when I heard the minister, she was saying how long it takes to open business. I was telling my colleague, in UAE, you just need 1 hour online and you can open a business. From a small country, we were nothing. We were a desert before 70s. And now we are the champion on AI. We're having data center. We're credible in the world. This is, Europe can do it. First, it needs to build the scale, mobilize capital. I'm hearing about competitiveness. Mobilize capital and modernize industry policy. Europe's core weakness is not saving, but fragmentation, as many have said. Capital markets, saving, and investment union must become a political priority. It's not only economic priority. It should be political. It needs political will, and this is Europe is lacking it because of fragmentation. Without deeper, integrated and capital markets, Europe will keep losing high growth companies to the US and others. So industrial policy must evolve. Europe needs a global champion in AI, clean tech, aerospace, and defense. Competition policy should protect the single market, but also allow scale where global competition requires it. With 1.2 trillion in annual investments needs, Europe must align physical tools, joint procurement, and targeted EU financing to support green, digital, and defense transition without undermining its social model. The second thing is the talent and innovation gap. You were talking about who invent electricity, who invent so and so. Now, this is not the question. Now, who is inventing, not before? Who is the champion in AI? So demographics and risk aversion threaten Europe's long-term capacity to grow. From 2026, Europe's population shrinks. Labor and skill shortages must be addressed through aggressive reskilling, vocational training, and truly attractive EU talent visa. Addressing the problem is not the way how to take Europe from here to the future. I'm a think tanker. We work on policies. We give policies to our governments. So the decision makers need to know where to go. not only addressing the problem. Strategic openness, reduce dependence without protectionism. Europe must diversify critical supply chains, not close them, especially in minerals, semiconductors, defense input, and energy. There are facts in the world, you cannot ignore it. China is here. United States is there, and the competition is there. And those small countries, they are in between. When the elephants make love, grass suffer. When the elephants fight, also grass suffer. We are the grass. So you have to know how to manage in this part of the world, with whom you align. My country saying, who will give me the best, I will deal with. And this is how our policy is going on. I don't want to take much of your time, but if I want to conclude, I think Europe knows what to do. Yes, I totally agree with that Draghi is only bringing the half full of the glass, not the other, the empty. He brought the empty, doesn't bring the half full of the glass. The question is whether it can act fast enough. First, complete capital markets union, build a defense and innovation industrial base, attract and retain global talent, streamline regulation and reduce dependencies. If Europe can align political will with strategic necessity, it can move decisively from ambition to action and reclaim global competitiveness in the era of intense geopolitical and technological competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Balfour, there are voices or growing voices which are calling for a more active international role of EU. Could our competitiveness benefit from more active, agile, or visible international role of EU?
No, of course. I mean, the European model is all based on trade, as Karel said earlier. So, of course, relations with the rest of the world are important. And I think we're actually living at a time in which there's a real risk that retrenchment in Europe is to the expense of engagement with the rest of the world. And this is about seeking like-minded partners who are willing to look at the rules-based order and how it can be salvaged from authoritarian attempts to, well, not just authoritarian attempts, but attempts by great powers to undermine it. Two, seeking new types of opportunities. There are pushes in that direction. I was in India earlier this year, and I've never heard such excitement about Europe and the European Union in India. Europe used to be London, Paris, Berlin. No, they were actually talking about Brussels and complaining that there isn't a direct flight from Brussels to Delhi. Real excitement, a big commitment to conclude a free trade agreement within the next month. So there's been a lot of movement in that direction. But it's blocked very frequently by the politics. I mean, the bottom line is that we have a paradoxical situation in Europe whereby we actually have a majority which is pro-European, would like to see more Europe on the international stage, would like to give Europe a greater role in managing affairs, but the politics of it are not favorable to that. We have political leaders that are not actually listening to what Europeans are saying and wanting, and that are really cultivating their very small garden. And this is happening in national politics, blocking progress at the European level, but it's also happening in European politics, where there is this form of retrenchment, which is also undermining the ability of the EU to engage with the rest of the world. It's not about projecting scale, it's really about engagement and partnership. And I think it's not just a question of, let's reach out to the rest of the world, there is a need to address the perceptions of Europe elsewhere, which are not very favorable. I mean, they're not, the Global South has frequently criticized Europe, has been pushing forward sort of post-colonial agendas. There is a moment of reckoning that is necessary for the EU to do this, but it is beyond doubt that the only way for Europe to revive its project, to address its competitiveness challenges, the growing gap between Europe and the US, China's catch-up, etc., it has to be done in concert with other like-minded countries around the rest of the world.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, it seems to me we heard some voices here in the room which somehow reflected unhappiness with the Americans. Is the transatlantic partnership in danger?
No, I guess as the American, I'm like the cymbal at the end of the symphony, right? Just one loud note. I want to make what was frustrating I'll go to 3 specific points and a quick observation. The first one is, Marie-Helene is right. You need scale. Andrew Carnegie, a fine European who became successful by immigrating to the United States, thank God we're stopping that practice, said, nobody got rich by being first. I don't care who invented electricity. People got rich by getting big. So it's all about scale. And however you get there, and I would just note, simplify the discussion. We went in 4 minutes from a very good note about what's needed to get big to, oh, but you can't do that till you do services, you can't do that till you reform the entire political structure of the European Union. Keep it simple. Pick 2 to 5 companies, make them huge. One of those has to be in defense, because that's the second point. If Europe can't project power, you're not going to be taken seriously. So build out the defense union, use it to drive through many of the obstacles that have stopped the development of the capital markets union and other points. The second thing in the immediate term, you have to seize the Russian assets because Ukraine needs to have the money to continue fighting for the next 2 years. And if Europe now cannot make that decision, it will not be taken seriously and those assets will be divided by others. Prime Minister Orban and others, I'm sure, will say in the council meeting room, we have to ask Donald what he thinks. I don't know whether Donald will say yes or no, but I know what he'll think. You had to ask me, so you are now on the table. That's projecting power. By projecting power, you become a safe space. The third thing, and the longer-term project for Europe, is to shape the team you want to be on for the long term. And this is my answer to your question. Because there will be a quick time after Trump. Even Vladimir Putin knows that Trump's promises can't be trusted, both because of who he is, but because he won't be there very long. So build for that time afterward. And your basic choice is between the United States and China. China, you know, will entice you with cheap goods and then overwhelm and gut you. There's a chance with a different United States to form a different kind of world. On what areas? 2 quick suggestions. The industries of the future, because we don't have habits. So it's AI quantum, it's life sciences, and it's the energy transition. That's where our children and grandchildren's prosperity will be made or lost. And we can do those things together if we begin formulating the rules. There's a vacuum right now because the United States is off driving up share prices in order to pay for a fairly stupid bunch of infrastructure build-outs. This is the moment for Europe to define that. I'd say the second thing, which I think we'll touch in the second panel, is build out public goods. One of the most offensive parts of the Trump administration, to me, is the attack on scientific research, shared understandings of public health, and frankly, on the very idea of depersonalized government. Europe has spent since 1848 demonstrating the importance of impartial expert people subject to accountability. And the United States is attacking that right now. It means that basic fundamental public goods, security, public health, scientific knowledge are up in the air, and they should be made a part of a future transatlantic relationship. And that's where I'll close my part of this, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. I'm basically the butler from the novel The Remains of the Day. Like, I'm really pretty good at buttling, and I know how to organize foreign policy. But I also am aware that all the politics around me have changed since my career began. I was a career State Department official. I started work 10 days before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Everything's different today. That knowledge is terrifying to me, but it's also liberating. And so when Europe looks at today, it's not, are we more like 1985 or not? You're in a world that is fundamentally different. The United States and Russia already tried to give away the assets that you hold because they don't think they have to listen. And it's your choice whether you make them listen or not.
Mr. Pekanov, would you like to react? Or I have a small question for you, but please do.
Can I return just to 2 points that were said? I have to say it was wonderfully summarized by Marie, what we are missing, what we are not doing. And then I have to disagree with Mr. Treichl that, well, we agree on all of this. No, maybe the people in this room agree, but I'm not sure in the political discussion we have enough discussion on this, on what we are losing from not having a completed capital markets or a savings and investment union. Do we hear it in the news? No, we don't. Do we ask politicians and ministers, say, why are you not moving faster in all of the countries? We don't. And maybe there we have to strengthen the narrative. We really have to say, listen, there are 10 trillion savings which are sitting idle. You don't get anything in return. Even worse, they go to the US and they actually make the returns of big US companies that you see are thriving nowadays in all of the technological sectors. Also, due to that, Americans are profiting from this because they did the smart thing and invested in the stock market, so they have been profiting from this. And you are losing, especially when there is inflation. So when we say this louder and louder, I think it will become a more clear point that we have to move on this. And the second point is scale. When we achieve this, we are also going to be able to achieve scale, which I think is extremely important. Without scale, we're not going to be moving fast enough. One thing that I saw when I was discussing with my students, I organized discussions on the Draghi report in the last semester, and I asked them on many things. And Draghi says very clearly, we need more big companies in Europe, which I also started believing. Nobody is in favor of this. It's crazy. 40 of my students, 40 out of 40 said, no, it's a good model that we have mid and small companies dominating in Europe. On any issue, I don't know where I will find 40 people that will agree on this. So we have to also explain why scale matters and why it helps us. And these are all not, they might sound like technocratic small things, but no, these are essential things to achieve prosperity and the welfare of European citizens. Thank you.
So do we need then a joint EU stock exchange or single EU stock exchange?
Whether we need a stock exchange, that's all digital. That's whether you have a stock exchange in Vienna or in Warsaw or in Berlin, it doesn't matter. In Frankfurt or in Paris, we need a capital market. And may I just make one point to you, because you said I was wrong, I'm right. The simple is, look back, think at 1995. You were just born. At that time, there was not one industry on this planet in which there was not at least one or two strong, major, worldwide leading European players. In the steel industry, the automotive industry, with Airbus, even in the aircraft industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, everywhere. In the banking industry, the largest bank in the world was European. 30 years ago. In all the new industries now, zero, nothing. No European. Why have we suddenly turned stupid? Have we lost our entrepreneurial touch? Are you screwing up? You're doing a great job. We have great entrepreneurs. We have everything. But we have one thing not, and that's the capital market. How did Europe get there until 1995? Europe was hugely successful because in all the old industries, banks were able to replace the capital market. What the US did with capital markets, we did with banks. That's how Deutsche Bank and BNP got so huge. Why? Because in all the old industries, you have factories, you have inventories, you have lots of things you can put securities on and you can collateralize it. Now, you cannot do that anymore because Facebook, Google has nothing to collateralize. It's all in there. We don't have factories and work, whatever you can take as security. That's one thing. And we had the financial crisis. Banks cannot do now what they could do then. You were Minister of Finance and you lived at the change at that time. I was still chairman of a bank in a time where I could decide whom I lent to. I had that for 10 years. Now a CEO of a bank cannot decide whom he lends to. It's the Committee of Credit and Compliance that decides. The chairman has nothing to say anymore. We live in a totally different world. And in a world like that, we need a capital market. So yes, you're right, and I was wrong, but we need to make it understood by the local politicians. I'm 100% sure that in most countries, they don't even talk about it.
I think one reason is also that Europeans have fear and don't understand or don't believe that capital markets can bring prosperity. So to make capital work, and that this, gets you richer and makes you richer, doesn't align with the model. It has to hurt. If you work hard, then it's right. So it's really the basic understanding of what capital markets can do for you is lacking in Europe, and we have to talk much, much more about it.
So again, the story is missing. And I also think that this is, we're here business people. I think this is what we should pressure. Good luck explaining the advantages of capital market to lay people. They have no obligation to be experts in that. When politicians won't do it, the people on the street won't do it. I think this is the unification of the markets, be it services or financial capital markets. That's something that we have to come together and lobby. The way the politicians came together, businesses have not.
So capital is one of the ingredients of a future growth and prosperity. The second or the first are people. But Europe is facing actually a negative trend, and the population will start declining or has already started. Mr. Sedláček, how are we going to address, handle, and somehow include this challenge into our ambition of higher competitiveness and stronger growth?
Enlargement. We're also the only empire that doesn't attack country but resists other countries from joining. It's also quite unique.
Okay, enlargement.
That's what you did with us, and congratulations, here we are.
But additionally, there are technologies which are also
turning off the TV,
growing. So how do you see the balance between labor force and AI and technologies which offer support in that respect, or we think?
So that's a good one. I think that's actually an excellent question. In my private view of the world, we are moving into the new republic of internet. It doesn't really matter, where you live or even where you work. I think what we should create here is to create the most excellent place for living. As was already mentioned, we just need to, I'm not saying we should sit around and wait, but Europe doesn't look like a bad place to live after Trump and after what's happening in Russia and China and other. It's the most favored place globally to live, and we should utilize that. We only really need to wait for the most excellent American students and American professors who will no longer feel free to breathe there to come to Europe, where we are also much more I mean, and we're the most equal society on this world. We don't have such huge differences between education levels like they have in the United States. Very excellent universities, but the average is sub-European. The same goes for healthcare. The same goes for actually finances. Even religiously speaking, South Dakota is more different from New York than north of Finland from south of Greece. And these are the things that we should try to, we should fight the brain drain by brain gain, by becoming the most amazing place to live. And we are poised for that if we're able to keep our liberties, to be able to criticize each other, to be able to be competitive, and not prioritize a company or a group of people judging by their political inability to criticize the leader. And this is something that we already have. We've been growing this for the last 75 years, like nowhere else in the world. And then we can hope to have the most excellent talents here. Maybe they won't earn as much as they earn in the first 2 years in the United States of America when they apply for a job at a stock market, for example, but they will have their families, and this kind of long-term thinking, again, create a story for Europe as the place to create, the place to think, and the place to criticize. Also, my last point, what we view very negatively, this European self-criticism and self-loathing, is also quite unique. You won't find this in many places of the world. This is our biggest advantage. It's the ability for the weak to criticize the strong. This is what makes democracy strong. This is what makes actually markets strong, that there are many competitors and all of them can become strong. How is it that Diepl, which was a German couple of guys in a garage, outperforming Google with their billions and trillions and their perfectly flawless stock exchange compared to ours. And yet it was these few guys who created a much better translating machine. Also, we shouldn't forget that Google started this way too, and Facebook also. They became large companies, and there is no guarantee that they will remain so.
Mr. Pekanov, people and AI.
So don't get me wrong. I also believe that Europe is the best place to live right now. But politics and decision-making should be about the future. And we could think about one example. I mean, 100 years ago, Argentina was a very, very good place to live. And what happened since then? I mean, it's a wonderful place, but economically has struggled. And we, unfortunately, have the seeds to go this way, extremely politically divided societies. So we have to be very careful on this. We have to look into the future. I completely agree. Brain gain, bringing people back, but it won't happen on its own. We have to invest a lot of resources. We had some good news recently, but actually, if you think about it, it may not be so good news. Two of the best, really, they were also professors of mine at MIT for a while when I was visiting there, now moved. Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee moved, but where did they move? To Switzerland, not to the EU. So we have to think about this. We have to invest much more. It's not only about money, it's about resources. It's about how you organize universities and research institutions, labs, young people, really investing into this. So we have to be very, very clear on this. And one last thing is, I was talking with Mr. Letta this year, and one thing that he said to me and really struck me, and he said he struck him when he was writing the report, talking with young people, and he said, well, I asked young entrepreneurs, what is your dream? And they said, to go to the US. This is really bad. This is really bad. We are losing the balance because they have, maybe it was last year, but I'm not seeing yet this reversal that we want to see. Yeah? We have to really do it.
Can I just kind of quickly say, I really like what Tomáš said, because he addressed the issue, how will Europe deal with its demographic problem, that we're shrinking. And then you said AI and whatever, to the shrinking. What Tomáš said is the best way to solve the problem for Europe, and actually all the ways on how you can solve the demographic problem in Europe are full of joy. What he said is full of joy. Make Europe so attractive that young people from all over the world want to come here and work here. That's the best thing. The second solution is dramatically increase the quality of male sperm. And the third is to build pots of wealth. all three things are great. So let's look forward to that. And building pots of wealth, there is no way around that anyway.
And turn off TV for a week.
Build pots of wealth for everybody. So if we do all these three things, we got it nailed.
Mr. Lannoo, but maybe a lighter regulation could help to make Europe a better place or more attractive place to live.
Yes, but not, let's make ourselves no illusions. I mean, regulation certainly in the areas I know becomes always more complex because our societies become more complex. Look at AI and digital. Do you have to regulate it, yes or no? I mean, the US has one piece of regulation in the domain of digital. We have, I think, 20. I mean, but do we choose the US model? No. Do we want our privacy to be protected? Yes. Do we want AI machines to respect our privacy? Yes. I mean, do you want the US model where you can use data just without limit? No, we don't want this. But that is the problem. And we need to be, fully conscious, let's say, that there is a cost of our model, but that there is also a huge benefit. I mean, for example, if a bank uses AI model to say, who could I give a credit? In Europe, this is constrained. In the US, this is not constrained because there is almost no legislation. And of course, this administration in the US does everything to keep it that way and to have no regulation at all and to even undermine what we have in Europe, because the big debate in Brussels is now the pressure after the big whatever oil. Now it's big tech pressuring Europe to water down its legislation. I think we need to be fully aware that also part of our model is that we are protecting our identity, protecting our privacy, protecting who we are and what we are. And that we don't need to find a balance between protection and what the markets want. And this is one of the phrases in the Draghi report, which surprised me a lot. Draghi called to revise the GDPR, which surprised me.
Can I add to this? I mean, I think, there's this, the dominant trend now is towards this bonfire of regulation, as if that is going to save Europe from its competitiveness problems. I actually think, this might well be a red herring. This is a very ideological debate, and it's about eliminating barriers that allegedly have been put up to transform Europe's economy towards an economy of the future, towards a green and tech economy. And it does require some legislative alignment and some regulatory alignment. The alliance, the ideological alliance is between the centre-right and the far-right to reduce legislation, especially on the Green Deal. It's not about boosting innovation. It's not about preparing for the future. It's about reducing the costs at home. And I think we need to question this approach because it's deeply ideological. And that's the Commission not fulfilling its role as guardian of the treaties and as executive if it's not making a cost-benefit assessment of what the bonfire of regulations is actually going to bring in terms of innovation.
Mr. O'Brien.
I'm not going to respond to each of Andreas's suggestions. But I do want to talk a little bit about what I think the actual US approach is. So in the third quarter, Google made about $100 billion in net revenue. 75% of that was from advertising on search and its relevant social media amounts. Facebook, $18 billion in the third quarter 24, and about 85% of that was advertising on social media. So what the US is in, and you carry on down through each of the 7 companies that make up the difference between the American Stock Exchange and European ones, they are all taking these senescent industries. Social media hasn't created anything basically since Mark Zuckerberg sat in his hotel room or his dorm room at Harvard, right? It's an old industry that doesn't innovate, but it now, because of advertising and the way it divides us, and Frank Fukuyama is absolutely right about this, it creates enormous cash flow. And so the actual American approach right now is to take that cash flow and buy the future. So the regulatory fight is not the one, and I think Rosa's pointed out the shallowness of much of the debate about this, but the regulatory question for Europe is, how do we equalize this battle for the future? And we do it partly by our own investments, but partly by looking at the way in which the US is trying to do it. As a very proud and patriotic American, I think this approach is myopic. I think we're over-investing in things that drive up the share price for some people immediately. That's going to lead to an enormous collapse, but it's also going to lead us to misallocate our investment resources and be less effective in the future, right? But I'm just a citizen thinking that. But what I do know is that Europe needs to be looking at whether its regulatory decisions today help it to become a much larger and powerful player in the industries of the future, particularly in the digital realm.
Thank you. Madam Al-Ketbi, apart from your comments, could you maybe also comment on how do you see Europe on the world energy map? I mean, energy, the prices of energy are growing, and that's also a part of European competitiveness story.
Coming from an oil-produced country, UAE, in 2000, UAE create something called Masdar, which is represent renewable energy. Well, this is coming from a country producing oil and depending 98 at that time of its budget on that. This is when we thinking where is the future is going. The leadership in UAE, they have vision. Remember the president of UAE 6 years ago in a conference for governments, World Government Summit, he said, we are thinking now, not now, we are thinking after when we will export the last barrel of the oil, where we should be in. So that's why now we have also created, invested and created green hydrogen, which we exported to Europe. The other problem in Europe, which I always see it over geopolitics or geoeconomics, this competition between European countries just also make Europe weak in terms of creating a European Union, a European market. This is mainly where you have the Italian vis-a-vis the French in our region and Africa and others. So this has to be fixed when you look to the common interest of that. The other thing, Europe, okay, what did they do now? We created the green hydrogen. Where is Europe now in that? Europe, and during Ukraine war, Europe back to coal, fossil oil. How? Because, sorry, but you don't look to the future. That's why they call you they call the old continent. And you enjoy being the old continent. So it's not being that you have old people, but your leadership, they should think to the future. Where is the future is going? Still the bureaucracy, the regulation, things you have it, preclude you from being competing with the other part of the world. You are, look, I've been in China. Yes, they have regulation, and you cannot do anything without WeChat or Alipay or whatever. But they have a place with I cannot remember, with so advanced, it's like 5 times Silicon Valley. Yes, we look to the Chinese and we say, oh, this is always fake things. But they are thinking, they are moving fast. They are competing with others. So it's not just you are looking to others down and you say, okay, we will not take it. Please think of the future. You have a great history, that's right, but will not benefit you now. Look, my country, talking about talents, people, how to attract them. Now, if you ask people, and this has been asked, people in the Arab world, where do you like to work? all of them UAE. UAE is the hub of talents. In fact, I met a businessman from Norway, and he was there opening a business. He said, your country is an oil country and you're rich. Why you are coming here? He said, because if I sit there, I will not find talent people. Here in Dubai, in UAE, all the talents and the young people are here. This is a story created from a country, I said.
We have 3 minutes left, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I stop here.
I'm sorry. We have 3 minutes left, and I would like to give a word to Mr. Treichl to wrap up our discussion. So we would like to be strong and unified. We would like to be a nice and attractive place to live. In order to achieve that, we need to look strong. We need to project power, as mentioned by Mr. O'Brien. So how do you see the path to implementation of the proposals and the issues we have discussed during the last hour and a half?
We've been talking about business and economy and the competitiveness of Europe all the time now, and later on we'll talk about the political issues. But I think we have had, unfortunately, no time to talk about democracy on this panel, which is also extremely important because it is linked to economic and business success, the way we live and we want to live in Europe. Both those things are hugely important. So what I think is the most important thing is that the civil society and business, and that's why we also like events like that, really become aware that we share a lot more than we actually believe we share. We just have to make sure that people who are mainly concerned about society and democracy understand economy and business, and that people who are in business and economy understand what society needs and what democracy really needs, and that we combine these two things. Let me just give you one little example, because we're talking about Europe and say, we're not successful for the moment. There are some countries in Europe that are incredibly successful. It's just the union that is not very successful for the moment. And as it happens, those countries who are very successful for the moment do things right. They have a much better capital market than we have in other countries. They have much better pension systems than we have in other markets. Therefore, the debt of those countries is substantially lower, and they can invest a lot more in education and in health. Countries like Sweden and Denmark are doing great. Two countries that are not even in the Union are doing extremely well, Switzerland and Norway. All those countries also have a lot more investments in venture capital and private equity than other European markets. We have these examples in Europe. We just need to do it, all of us, and do it together. And if we get politicians to understand that that's what we want, that we people from civil society, whether we're in business or in NGOs, it doesn't matter. We all want that. We want that success for Europe, and we want them to work for us. They will do it at one point in time. Let's not give up. We had great things in Europe, great periods. It will come again. Let's just wait a little bit, not too long.
Thank you very much. Our time is up. Thank you for your sincere and open participation in our debate. And I hope at least we gave a small addition to the mutual understanding of possibilities and potentials of our mutual future.
Thanks to the chairwoman.
Thank you.